Welcome to Excel Tips. My name is Neale Blackwood, and today we're going to look at how ChatGPT, so the artificial intelligence interface, can help you with your Excel problems. So we're going to look at 10 questions. I thought I'd split it up into fact-based questions. So these should be a simple yes or no, does it work? And some skills, can it write Excel formulas? So we'll do that. And then some opinions on, let's say, some top 10 functions and features for accountants in Excel. I'll also look at a couple of topics that sort of split the Excel community, trying to get an independent answer to should we use range names and should we use the indirect function. So we'll see what it comes back with that. Now, I wrote the original article in February 2023. I'm doing this video in late March 2023. Now, between those two dates, I believe there's been an update to the interface. So we'll see the differences here. So let's dive in. So I'll move Excel here over to another screen so we can do some copying and pasting. So here is the ChatGPT interface. It gives you some example questions, talks about the capabilities and also its limitations. With those, let's try the first question. Okay, so the keyboard shortcut for today's date, it's typing it in, and it's control and the semicolon at the same time, which is correct. So that's nice and easy. It's giving us some more information as well. It's telling us that it's going to be a static value, which is that's a good thing to bring up because there is a today function which it's shown us. So there you go. So the today function is a formula that displays today's date, but it will update. So that's very good. So that's probably the perfect answer. So don't have a problem with that. I'll show you that it does work. So if we go here and it's control and the semicolon and it enters today's date. As you can see, I'm recording this on the 27th of March. Okay, let's try the next question. So this is a keyboard shortcut to open up the data validation dialog in Excel. Data validation allows you to put a drop down in a cell and some other things. And it's actually given us there's two shortcuts. So you can use Alt and then you press D and then you press L. Alt DL will open up the data validation, and you can also use AVV. Now, the only thing I don't like about this is it's got plus. You don't hold these down. You actually press these in sequence. But it does. I think it does mention that. The Alt key and then V twice. So yes. So that's two shortcuts for the same one. I'll show you how they work. So if we want to open up the data validation dialog, you press Alt DL, and there we go. So that's the data validation. And the other way to do it is Alt AVV, and that also works. So both shortcuts work. I think the Alt DL is an older one that works in the older versions of Excel, and a lot of the shortcuts Excel has are actually backward compatible. So that's why that one still works. Okay, so tick, tick, it got both of those right, and no problems. So let's try a skill. So what I wanted to do is I want to round a formula to the nearest 5 cents. Here we go. Okay, it's talking about using the mround function. It gives us an example. That's good. And there we go. So I've got a sheet here, so I'll copy this. And here we go. Here's the rounding. So I'm going to put that in there. The format's out a bit, but I can make that a bit bigger. There we go. So this is the formula I used. It's used mround, which is okay. Mround sort of gives you different roundings. It's not consistent. I tend to use the round function like this, where I divide the number by 0.05, round it to 0 decimal places, and then multiply it by 0.05. I find this is more reliable than using mround. But this will work in this case. So there we go. So yeah, mround that is the function that is designed to work with specific values if you want to round to it. So I would give it a tick there. Let's try the next one. So this one is the formula to extract the sheet name, which I've covered in a few articles. Okay, so it's explaining to me about the cell function, which is good because that's going to return the value. Okay, and then it's showing the full formula that's going to do it, and it's even explaining how it works, which is pretty impressive. Now this is the old way of doing it. So this is the old function. There is an easier way to do it now, but it's given us the standard way. So I can copy, should be able to copy this, and I've got my example here. So I can just drop this in here and I will paste it there. There we go, sheet name example. It works. That's the name of the sheet that we're in. So it's using the right function, the cell function and the length function and the find. So yes, that works perfectly. So no problems there. Okay, the next question. This one is, I've got a range containing numbers and I want to write a formula to display the top 5. So here we go. Okay, and it's using the large function. Okay, so yes, large function will work, and it's explaining how to use the large function. Okay, so it's be interesting to see how it, okay, it's using the text join to do it. Oh, this is going to put it all together in a single list, which is, I don't know if what did I say? I said, write a formula to display the top 5. I didn't say to put it in a range, so let's test this one. Let's copy the formula, and I will paste it in here, paste it in there, and let's see the result. And there it is. So that is the 5 numbers in descending order, so highest to lowest, in one cell, which is interesting. So it's used the text join to join it together. This large function here, using, this is called array syntax, that is generating the 5 numbers, and then this text join is actually just joining those numbers together with a comma between them. We could use this by itself. If I copy that and then place that in a cell by itself, this will spill across, so which is part of dynamic array functionality. So it's spilling across, so each of these is in a separate cell. If you want it to go down, instead of using the comma separator, you can use the semicolon separator, and that will actually list it down the page like that. So that's a correct solution. So it's listed the 5 numbers, in this case in a single cell there, and you could then take the part of the formula that's actually generating those numbers, and you could put it in a cell by itself to list the numbers as well. Just a note, you do need the latest version of Excel for this to work, because it is using what's called dynamic arrays to display this. Okay, so far it's 5 out of 5. Let's have a look. Now these ones I can't really tick because they're opinions. So I have opinions on these as well, but I'll give you what I think about the response here. So let's try that. Okay, top 10 functions for accountants. Commonly used functions should learn. Sum, don't have a problem. Average, yeah, I'm not a average. You don't use that much. VLOOKUP, again, VLOOKUP is used a lot by accountants, but it has been replaced. The if function, yep, don't have a problem with that. Concatenate, that's not really a function you need to learn, because you can use the ampersand symbol. Max and min have limited uses. Count, limited uses. COUNTIF's pretty good. PMT, I wouldn't say that's important. And round, yep, rounding is important. Yep, I'm saying it's not an exhaustive list. You can respond to it, and let's take VLOOKUP for example. So VLOOKUP has been replaced by XLOOKUP as the best lookup function in recent versions. Let's see what it says to that. Yes, that's correct. Here's a new function. Yeah, considered improvement. Several advantages. Okay, so yeah, it's giving you some of the advantages. It's got built-in error handling. That's correct. It returns arrays. That's cool. It's got optional arguments. Is more powerful and versatile than VLOOKUP, and is recommended. Yeah, so don't have a problem with that. That's all accurate. Yeah, so I said you can respond, and it then responds back to you. In this case, with the advantages of XLOOKUP over VLOOKUP. Okay, so let's try another one. Let's try top 10 features that accountants should learn. Let's see how we go there. Commonly used pivot tables, yes, big tick. Data validation, that's what we just had a look at, the shortcut. Yes, I'll agree with that. Conditional formatting, yes. Macros, yes. It's sort of less popular. Solver, yeah, pretty good. Goal seek, yeah, to some extent. Scenario manager, that's sort of caught up with Solver. Charts and graphs, yep. Quick analysis, that's a feature that's been added lately. I don't know that quick analysis is used very much, but Power Query on the end, yes, definitely. So that's a pretty good list. I would maybe take out Solver and put in Power Pivot. Goal Seek also not used much. Scenario Manager is very closely linked to Solver. So Solver and Goal Seek basically do what if analysis, and Scenario Manager's caught up in that. But yeah, that's a pretty good list. And if you learnt a lot of that, you would be probably considered an advanced Excel user with macros and pivots and Power Query that's in there. Okay, no, I like that. That's a good list. Okay, here we go. So here's one that is going to be interesting because, as I mentioned, range names do split the Excel community. Should you use range names in Excel? Here we go. Okay, formulas and worksheets more organized. Yes, I agree with that. Easier to understand, less prone to errors. Yeah, and it's going through some of the benefits. Easier to understand, more organized, less prone to errors. Basically repeating what it did there. Time saving, yep, can be quicker. Easier to audit. Yeah, that one could be a little bit open to argument because some people say range names are less easier to audit, but that's a different conversation. Yeah, so it looks like it's sort of saying that there's lots of benefits. It didn't come up with any downsides of using range names. So there we go. Range names allow you to name cells and ranges, just like you give a sheet a name, or you can give a cell or a range a name. So, and then you can use those names in formulas and also other features. There's also some new stuff in Excel. The lambda function allows you to create custom functions, and you have to use range names to do that. So I'm a big proponent of range names, so looks like ChatGPT is as well. Now here's one that's on how you use range names. I capitalize a letter. I capitalize the first letter of any words that I use. So if I'm going to use tax rate, I would use a capital T and a capital R. Let's see if it mentions it. So range names are not case sensitive, so you can type them in lowercase. It doesn't matter if you use them. That's correct. That being said, it's a good practice to use a consistent capitalization when defining range names to make it easier to read. And let's use the example of sales data. So a capital S and a capital D, which I think is called camel case instead of uppercase and lowercase. So, yep. So it's saying whatever you're using, be consistent, which is a very good thing to point out in Excel. Consistency is important. That's for formatting, naming conventions, things like that. So it looks like it says you should. And lastly, the indirect function. So let's see what it says about the indirect function. The indirect function allows you to create formulas that use text to build references. Now, the thing with indirect is it breaks the ability to track where a formula is coming from. So Excel allows you to find out where the cell references are linked to. And so you can follow the links, if you like, back to the source. When you have an indirect function in the middle of that, you can't, because the formula auditing tools won't let you track if there's an indirect function in the middle of formula links. So that's the downside of indirect. It's also what's called a volatile function, but that's less of an issue these days. It should be used with caution and only when necessary, which is pretty right. That's a good response. Introduce potential risks. Yep. Could make them more... this one's got pros and cons. So there you go. So that's good. Dynamic referencing. That's correct. Simplify formulas, which it can do. It can also automate some stuff that can be difficult otherwise. So performance issues, that's the volatility that I mentioned. Error prone, yes, the indirect function can introduce potential errors because you're actually using text to build your references. Okay, so security risk, that's a different spin on it. I never really thought of that. You could build a formula to access a file that you, as long as you have access to, you can open. So yeah, I'm not really sure on that because it doesn't work on closed files. So you need the ability to open the file. If you have read access to a folder, then you should be able to link to another workbook. Interesting one. Overall, it's helpful in certain situations, but it should be used with caution and only when necessary. If possible, avoid using indirect and reference cells directly in your formula, as this makes the formulas easy to understand, debug, and maintain. So overall, it's got 3 pros and 3 cons. So I guess it is a bit of a 50-50 split there. So yeah, interesting. So I would probably go along with all of that. So yeah, I think that's a good listing. So pretty much out of the 10 questions, I think most of them were pretty correct. The top 10 functions for accountants I thought probably could have been a bit better. The features were pretty good. In general, average is used a little bit, but not a lot. VLOOKUP at the moment is used a lot, but is probably being replaced by XLOOKUP. The if function, no problem with that. Concatenate, you can actually use the ampersand symbol above the number 7 to do concatenation. Max and min are used a little bit. Count, maybe. Count only counts numbers. COUNTIF, you probably use COUNTIF-S these days. COUNTIF is a single criteria, whereas COUNTIF-S is a multi-criteria. PMT, this allows you to work out a payment for a loan. That is used, but it's not used a lot. And the round function, don't have a problem with that because rounding is important for reports and budgets and forecasts and things. Okay, and as we saw, it does respond back to your responses and comes back, in this case, with the advantages of XLOOKUP over VLOOKUP. Overall, ChatGPT does work really well and answer questions quite well on Excel, and it is developing. So I think this has come back probably slightly better than when I first did it. So it is developing all the time. So it can be another tool in your tool belt to work with Excel and to, if nothing else, to give you some ideas on on ways to solve different formulas. In our case, all the formulas worked. So the rounding worked, the sheet name worked, and the top 5. Though the top 5, it used text join text join is a new function too, by the way, and that basically put all of the answers in the single cell. But it did have the solution there in terms of being able to list the top 5, which I then put by itself in a cell, and I just changed the commas to semicolons. This is called array syntax, and when you use commas, it puts it across the page. When you use semicolons, it puts it down the page. So that's the difference there. Array syntax is a fairly advanced topic in Excel. So there we go. So overall, I would give ChatGPT a big tick. Probably 8 or 9 out of 10, I reckon, given that we had 10 questions. The thing that keep in mind is it's only going to get better, probably. There we go. So that is ChatGPT. GPT and how it works with Excel. Thanks for watching.